Your body is aging faster than it should be, and the culprit isn't what you think. It's not your diet, your exercise routine, or even your genes. It's a hormone called cortisol that's quietly accelerating every aging process in your body right now. Today, we're diving into cortisol as the primary regulator of aging, and more surprisingly, how a specific leadership style called servant leadership might be the key to slowing down biological time. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how stress hormones control your aging process and discover practical ways to use leadership principles to live longer. Let me bring in someone who's been researching this fascinating connection between leadership and longevity. So help me understand, is cortisol really controlling how fast we age?
Absolutely, and the research is pretty striking. According to the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which followed over 1,800 people for more than 6 years, cortisol follows this really interesting U-shaped pattern across our lifespan.
U-shaped? What does that mean exactly?
So cortisol levels actually decrease in your 20s and 30s, stay relatively stable in your 40s and 50s, then start increasing after that. But here's the key. Cortisol is implicated in the pathogenesis of many age-related diseases.
Wait, so it's not just about feeling stressed? This hormone is literally causing diseases as we age?
Exactly. The research shows cortisol dysregulation speeds up mechanisms of aging, including heart disease, diabetes, and inflammation. It's like having your body's stress response stuck in overdrive.
That's terrifying. But you mentioned something even more interesting, that there's research showing cortisol variability might be more important than average levels?
Yes, this comes from Pennsylvania State University research. They found that how much your cortisol fluctuates day to day, what they call cortisol variability, is associated with inflammation and might be a novel marker of aging, especially in older adults.
So it's not just having high cortisol, it's having unpredictable cortisol that's aging us?
Exactly. Think of it like your body never knowing what to expect. That constant uncertainty creates this chronic state of biological stress that accelerates aging at the cellular level.
Okay, so we've established that cortisol is basically our aging accelerator. But where does leadership come into this? How does managing people connect to managing our biology?
This is where it gets really fascinating. There's research from PNAS showing that leadership is actually associated with lower levels of stress. But not all leadership styles are created equal.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's this specific approach called servant leadership that's been studied extensively. A study of 277 healthcare workers during COVID found that servant leadership was negatively related to psychological distress.
Servant leadership? That sounds almost counterintuitive. Isn't leadership supposed to be about being in charge?
That's exactly the misconception. Servant leadership is characterized by prioritizing the needs of subordinates, promoting their growth, and fostering a supportive work environment. It's leadership through service, not dominance.
And this actually reduces stress hormones?
The research suggests it does. Another study with over 1,600 nurses in Chinese hospitals found that servant leadership moderated the relationship between workplace stress and psychological distress.
So servant leaders are literally creating environments that protect people's biology from stress damage?
That's a great way to put it. And there's even neuroscience research that explains how this works at the brain level.
Now I'm really curious, what's happening in our brains?
According to neuroscience research, servant leaders build psychological safety, which triggers oxytocin release, the trust hormone. This actually shuts down fear responses in the amygdala and frees up the prefrontal cortex for clear thinking.
Wait, so servant leadership is literally rewiring our stress response?
Exactly. And here's the key part for cortisol. Fear-based leadership spikes cortisol, shutting down memory and decision-making. But servant leaders lower cortisol by modeling calm and empathy.
This is incredible. So we're talking about leadership as a biological intervention, not just a management style.
That's exactly right. The research shows servant leadership creates structured recovery cycles and helps teams remain composed under pressure instead of collapsing in crisis.
But let me play devil's advocate here. This research is mostly on healthcare workers and nurses. Does this apply to other industries?
That's a fair question. While much of the cortisol and servant leadership research has been in healthcare settings, the biological mechanisms are universal. Cortisol doesn't care what industry you work in.
True. And healthcare is probably one of the most stressful environments, so if it works there...
Exactly. Plus, there's broader research on empowering leadership styles and stress reduction. A French university hospital study actually measured both perceived stress and salivary cortisol levels.
Salivary cortisol, so they were measuring actual biological markers, not just how people felt?
Right. They were looking at the actual hormone levels, which gives us much stronger evidence that leadership styles have real biological effects.
This is making me think about my own workplace. How would someone actually implement servant leadership principles to get these anti-aging benefits?
Well, the research shows servant leaders create ethical work climates, display empathy and compassion, and facilitate resilience. It's about genuinely caring for people's development and well-being.
But that sounds like it could be exhausting for the leader. Are they taking on everyone else's stress?
Interestingly, the PNS research found that leadership itself is associated with lower stress levels. So servant leaders might actually be protecting their own biology while helping others.
That's fascinating. So it's not a zero-sum game where leaders sacrifice their health for their team's well-being?
Not according to the research. In fact, the neuroscience suggests that when you create psychological safety for others, you're also creating it for yourself through mirror neurons and social connection.
Mirror neurons, so we're literally mirroring each other's stress levels?
To some extent, yes. The brain learns by imitation, so when servant leaders model calm and empathy, it activates mirror neurons in their teams, creating this positive feedback loop.
This is making me wonder about the long-term implications. If cortisol really is this primary aging regulator and servant leadership can control it, are we talking about significantly longer lifespans?
That's the million-dollar question. The Lamb Clinic research suggests that managing cortisol levels could help us age more gracefully and healthily, potentially slowing mechanisms like heart disease, diabetes, and inflammation.
So we might not be talking about living to 150, but living to 80 with the health of a 60-year-old?
That seems more realistic based on current research. It's about health span as much as lifespan, maintaining vitality and cognitive function as we age.
And the beautiful thing is that this isn't some expensive intervention or complicated medical treatment. It's about how we treat each other at work.
Exactly. The research shows that servant leadership can significantly reduce emotional exhaustion and enhance job satisfaction. It's accessible to anyone in a leadership position.
But what about people who aren't in formal leadership roles? Can they still benefit from these principles?
Absolutely. You can practice servant leadership principles in any relationship, with colleagues, family, friends. The biological benefits come from creating psychological safety and reducing stress for others and yourself.
So it's really about shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset in how we interact with people?
That's a great way to frame it. Instead of seeing relationships as competitive or transactional, servant leadership sees them as opportunities for mutual growth and support.
And the research suggests this mutual support literally changes our biology at the hormonal level?
The evidence certainly points in that direction. When we feel supported and valued, our stress response systems can actually reset and function more optimally.
This is making me think about workplace culture in a completely different way. We're not just talking about productivity or employee satisfaction, we're talking about collective longevity.
That's exactly right. Organizations that embrace servant leadership principles might literally be extending their employees' healthy lifespans while improving performance.
It's like the ultimate win-win scenario, better business outcomes and better biological outcomes.
And the research on cortisol variability suggests that consistency in leadership approach might be just as important as the approach itself. Predictable, supportive leadership creates biological stability.
So when you step back from all this research, what's the big picture here? Are we looking at a fundamental shift in how we think about leadership and health?
I think we are. The science is showing us that leadership isn't just about business outcomes, it's about human biology. How we lead and how we're led literally affects how we age.
And the servant leadership approach gives us a practical framework for optimizing both. It's not just theory, it's actionable science.
Exactly. Whether you're leading a team of 2 or 200, the principles are the same. Prioritize others' growth, create psychological safety, and model the calm, empathetic behavior you want to see.
Here's what I find most compelling about all this. We started with this scary idea that cortisol is aging us faster than we thought, but we're ending with this empowering realization that we have more control than we imagined.
That's the beauty of this research. It's not just identifying the problem, it's pointing toward a solution that's fundamentally about human connection and care.
So the next time you're in a stressful work situation, remember, how you respond isn't just affecting your day, it's affecting your biology. And if you're in a position to lead, you have the power to literally slow down aging for yourself and others. The fountain of youth isn't some mythical spring. It might just be the way we treat each other every single day. Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. And remember, your next interaction could be an anti-aging intervention.